Yuki Tsukumo, one of the most dangerous people on the planet and one of the strongest people alive. Yuki is one of 4 special grade sorcerers in the Jujutsu world, the highest ranking that anyone could ever receive. This means that Yuki can wipe out an entire country on her own and take down many of the strongest characters in the series like it's a regular part of her day. With only 4 special grade sorcerers in the entire series, with more once you start counting people like Sukuna and others at that top dog level, Yuki is undeniably one of the strongest characters Jujutsu Kaisen has ever seen. In her fight against a man who wanted to take over the entire planet and turn all of humanity into a massive cursed spirit for his own amusement, Yuki put everything on the line, going so far that she turned into a black hole that could wipe out the whole planet if she wanted to, all at the cost of her own life, flooding her curse techniques so much that it took her massive force of will and the best barrier user of all time to suppress her strength, something that no other sorcerer has shown up until this point, even Gojo and Sukuna themselves. One of Yuki's many journeys across the country took her to a bridge where she heard the violent sounds of a fight, catching her interest. The boy she found, Todo, was only in the 3rd grade and beating up someone twice his age with no contest. Yuki then takes Todo as her student and trains him, teaching him simple domain, and Todo grew into a grade 1 sorcerer over the years. This is Yuki's only known student at this point. Yet by his 2nd year at Kyoto's Jujutsu High, he had become a monster compared to those around him. Yuki's student Todo became so strong that no one in the Tokyo and Kyoto schools would oppose him in his 2nd year. The Tokyo squad even claiming that all of them combined may not be enough to take Todo down, even with new first years Yuji Itadori, Megumi Fushiguro, and Nobara Kugisaki at their side. The Tokyo squad are grade 3 in strength all the way to semi-grade 1, making them at a bare minimum equal to grade 2 cursed spirits, with their strongest approaching special grade curses in strength. Yet Todo with Yuki's teachings was too much for all of them to handle, even with 6 of them fighting Todo on his own. Todo is then put in a do-or-die situation where the Kyoto exchange event is invaded by a special grade cursed spirit, Hanami, with all the Kyoto students seeing Todo as the only hope for them to survive. Todo with his new student Yuji beats Hanami so badly that it resorts to using its own domain by draining the life from nature around itself, which it swore to protect. Hanami is strong enough to have walked through Megumi, Maki, Inumaki, and Noritoshi without even trying, which it points out later, and is even compared to vengeful spirit Naoya for how durable it is later on. Yet thanks to his intelligence, diligent training, and time spent learning from Yuki, Todo and Yuji play a pivotal role in saving all the Tokyo and Kyoto students from death. After Yuji is taken to his limits by the death of his friends and Sukuna and Mahito's actions, Todo steps in to fight Mahito, a special grade cursed spirit that Kento Nanami thought would grow to a point of no return if left unchecked. In the fight, Todo can't even do damage to Mahito, but Todo is so skilled that he's able to keep Itadori in the fight despite Yuji being near death, and becomes the main focus for Mahito until the fight ends. The same Mahito who could fight Nanami and Yuji, and the same Mahito who almost murdered Yuji on his own. After becoming the biggest threat to Mahito in their fight with his skill and intelligence alone, Todo tricks Mahito one last time and plays a key role in saving Yuji and all of Shibuya from Mahito's new form. Todo is also one of the most respected students in his entire generation. Satoru Gojo, the strongest sorcerer, says Todo's potential is beyond special grade at his peak, and even looks at him as the future of the next generation. On top of Todo using the Black Flash, giving him a higher understanding of cursed energy. Todo also had many achievements in the Night Parade of 100 Demons that threatened to wipe out all of Japan and the world if they didn't succeed, killing 5 grade 1 curses in a special grade and not even using his full strength until the very end. All this is the result of Todo's intelligence, natural talent as a fighter, his training, and Yuki Tsukumo's teachings that molded him into the sorcerer that he is today. After traveling the world, Yuki returns to Jujutsu High, hearing about the death of Toji in search of Satoru Gojo. Yuki then meets Suguru, the man who was once the strongest alongside Gojo, who was now his 2nd in terms of strength. Suguru is the same man who would later wage war against all of Japan in hopes of wiping out every non-sorcerer alive, an event that was set into motion by Yuki's words. Yuki, seeing Suguru instead, introduces herself and decides to have a conversation with him. Yuki then tells Suguru that she's a special grade sorcerer, the highest ranking that a sorcerer can possibly be given. Special grade sorcerers are strong enough to wipe out entire countries on their own and take down special grade cursed spirits, the highest ranking curses in existence, making her one of the strongest people alive, with a decade passing before a 4th person gained her same rank. Yuki has been on a mission overseas. She's at odds with Jujutsu High and aiming to get rid of the problem that Jujutsu High wants to treat in small doses. Yuki has been on a mission to get rid of cursed spirits entirely, either by getting rid of cursed energy in all of humanity or by teaching humans to control cursed energy. Cursed spirits are born from an overflow of cursed energy from non-sorcerers, so either getting rid of cursed energy altogether or teaching humans how to control cursed energy would stop curses from ever being born. This was Yuki's biggest objective in life, and played a major role in her decisions until her death. 11 years later, Japan is under attack by a sorcerer named Kenjaku, a man who traveled 1,000 years through history and has now taken over Suguru Geto's body. Kenjaku's main goal in the series is the polar opposite of Yuki's, to create a world that optimizes cursed energy by taking all the cursed energy in Japan and merging it into a massive cursed spirit that can end everything in its way. Kenjaku is also inhabiting the body of a special grade sorcerer, with hundreds of years of knowledge and combat experience by his side. This sets up Kenjaku as the main antagonist for Yuki to fight in the future, since their goals will eventually clash in the end. Kenjaku's body that he took over in Yuki's era has a curse technique called curse spirit manipulation that lets him absorb cursed spirits and use them at will. After absorbing Mahito and extracting his curse technique, Kenjaku gets ready to use idol transfiguration on 1,000 people in Japan at the same time. Before even moving or announcing his technique, Yuki notices exactly what he's going to do before anyone else picks up on what Kenjaku is doing. This showcases Yuki's intelligence and how quickly she can assess a situation when none of the other fighters even know what's going on. Kenjaku does exactly as Yuki expected and uses idol transfiguration on 1,000 people in Japan by casting Mahito's technique on all of them at the same time. Yuki is shocked at Kenjaku's ability to do this and visibly confused that Kenjaku can activate a technique remotely. This shows a difference in knowledge and experience between Yuki and Kenjaku, with Yuki being in total shock while Kenjaku is very casual about what he just did, showing that Kenjaku's knowledge of Jujutsu surpasses Yuki's, which makes sense given the gap of experience between them. After a brief conversation, Kenjaku explains his plans. Urume falls to poison, and all the Tokyo and Kyoto students are free. Momo Nishimaya, a semi-grade 2 sorcerer, voices concern for Yuki, saying that they should wait for Mai Zenin to provide backup before Yuki attacks. Yuki dismisses this since Mai Zenin is a grade 3 sorcerer and so much weaker than Yuki that there isn't even a remote comparison between them. This shows how much of a secret Yuki's strength is to many characters in the series, since the students don't even realize who she is and what she can do. Kenjaku leaves with Satoru Gojo, who's trapped inside of Prison Realm, and the culling games will now begin. Meeting with Tengen, Yuki and the others are told about Kenjaku's plan to merge Tengen with all of humanity, giving him enough power to spread malice to the entire planet at one time. Yuki and Choso, a special grade death painting, who comes up again later, volunteer to be Tengen's bodyguards against Kenjaku. This sets up the biggest fight in Yuki's life, since the fate of the world might depend on if she wins. Yuji and the others make progress defeating many opponents in the culling games, but Kenjaku hasn't been stopped, wants Tengen, and is on his way. Speaking with Tengen, Yuki says that she was also a star plasma vessel alongside Riko Amanai, the girl killed by Toji 11 years ago, whose death sent Tengen's evolution spiraling out of control. The star plasma vessels are those who could merge their souls with Tengen to stop Tengen from evolving and becoming a threat to the entire world. Yuki rejected this idea, since the thought of sacrificing children's lives was something that she couldn't do, even going as far to say that she would have allied with the children of the star, which would have put her against Gojo and Suguru, had their goal been to seize control rather than killing the vessels. Tengen then asks Yuki to tell her what the voices of the previous vessels are saying, since she can't hear the vessels after they become a part of her. This implies that Yuki can hear the voices of the souls of others, which is something that no other sorcerer has been shown to do. Only Mahito, who changes people's souls, has shown something remotely in the same category. Yuki then rejects this idea, and the conversation between Yuki and Tengen concludes. Breaking into Tengen's barrier, Kenjaku has arrived and the fight to decide the fate of the world begins. After Kenjaku makes his way through the first line of defense, Yuki is now his main opponent, telling Choso to leave everything up to her. This puts the fate of the whole planet onto Yuki, because Tengen will be absorbed by Kenjaku if she loses. This gives Yuki one of the most important fights in the entire series, and puts the fate of the world on her shoulders. Choso, the death painting, then takes his leave and concedes giving up the fight for Yuki to take center stage. Choso is a special grade death painting, one of the last of his kind, and the strongest cursed human hybrid on Jujutsu High's side. Choso's strength is said by Kenjaku to be equal to that of a grade 1 sorcerer, putting him in the same range as a special grade curse in strength. Yet both Choso and Yuki agree that Yuki is the stronger of the two of them at the time. Kenjaku, Yuki's opponent, is now ready to face Yuki with all of his strength. Kenjaku is in the rank of special grade sorcerers, making him one of the strongest antagonists in the entire series. His rank alone gives him enough strength to wipe out an entire country on his own, with special grade curses standing beneath him in strength, making Yuki and Kenjaku a clash of two of the strongest characters in the series at the time. Kenjaku begins to question what Yuki can do, while Yuki is more than ready to start the fight. Yuki is a special grade sorcerer who even the higher-ups of the Jujutsu world didn't have any information on despite Kenjaku's best efforts. This explains why many characters in the series don't seem to understand Yuki's strength, making her true power a mystery not only to the readers, but to many characters in the series, including Kenjaku, who had the memories of Suguru as well. Having no idea what Yuki's capable of, Kenjaku decides to be cautious before approaching her, summoning a special grade curse spirit Ganesha, a divine curse based on an Asian god that's meant to remove all obstacles in its path. Special grade curse spirits are the strongest curses in the series, who at their peak have been shown to walk straight through grade 1 sorcerers, putting them on a level above many other enemies presented to the sorcerers in the past. Yuki, seeing Kenjaku's summoning, calls him out on what he's doing and rushes to the curse with no hesitation. Using Garuda, a curse tool imbued with her curse technique, Yuki fires Garuda at Ganesha's head, killing the curse in one attack. This shot to the head shows Yuki's intelligence, since it's the most efficient way to kill cursed spirits, which her student Todo spoke about as well, giving Yuki an instant win against a curse that would have murdered many other sorcerers in the series, with no effort involved on her part. Kenjaku, in shock, realizes what Yuki was doing, and has no time to respond since Yuki's already on his heels. Yuki then punches Kenjaku so hard that both of his arms rip apart and sends him flying with one hit to the face. This is the same Kenjaku who looked down on Choso so much that he spent the entire fight mocking him, not once, but twice, with Choso not landing a single attack on Kenjaku in the end. This shows how big of a gap there is between special grade and grade 1 sorcerers, which Choso was compared to, since Yuki is on a different level entirely. Getting hit by Yuki, Kenjaku was sent flying with his hands barely hanging onto his body. Kenjaku crashes through several things in his way and is hit so hard that he rips through Tengen's barrier and breaks the laws of physics entirely, which Kenjaku calls breaking the barrier's circular definition. Circular definitions are basically a scientific way of saying it is what it is, since a thing being defined is a part of its own definition. Red is defined as red, a ball is a ball, and so forth. What this means is that Yuki punched Kenjaku so hard that the barrier stopped functioning the way that it normally would and ripped him outside of the entire thing instead of sending him backwards like a punch normally would. Kenjaku, having been hit so hard that he's now missing a limb, starts to think about what happened to him, saying that Yuki's technique, which uses mass, is a concept that targets a curse technique. Mass so overwhelming that it surpasses anything inside and outside. This is Kenjaku's way of saying that Yuki's strength basically breaks logic in the sense that her technique makes her way stronger than her body should be able to handle. Yet this has no ill bearing on Yuki, making her a powerhouse that can amp her own strength to defy logic itself. Yuki, seeing that Kenjaku is figuring out what's going on, then explains exactly what her curse technique is, putting virtual mass into herself with a technique called Star Rage. Her Shikigami Garuda, who she turned into a cursed tool, is the only target for Star Rage beside herself. What this basically means is that Yuki is able to give herself more mass than her body naturally has to boost her strength in a way that doesn't change her body in any visible way. This is also never shown to have any negative effects like slowing Yuki down or giving her disadvantages that she wouldn't usually have. This also introduces a concept that many people miss when speaking about Yuki, since by explaining her technique, she activated a binding vow called revealing one's hand. Revealing one's hand is a concept spoken about by Kento Nanami as explaining your technique and its rules to your opponent, making your technique more effective. This means that by explaining her technique to Kenjaku, Yuki is now amped to be even stronger than she would be in base, raising the stakes of her fight with Kenjaku even higher, as Yuki is now using the peak of her technique to boost her physical strength. Healing himself with the reverse curse technique, which takes a massive portion of curse energy to do, Kenjaku brings his focus back to Yuki, thinking that no high-grade curses that he has will be worth anything against her, and even questions if he can take Yuki down. The same Kenjaku that toyed with Choso, and the same Kenjaku that sent Yuji crashing to the ground, while barely using his full strength, showing how high the gap is between Yuki and many other characters in the series, as Kenjaku has only ever had these doubts about the strongest sorcerers that ever lived. Yuki then begins to question what else Kenjaku can do and starts to remember every ability he's used so far, taking Kenjaku's gravity technique into account, realizing that idle transfiguration was a one-time use, and even noting that he may have a fourth technique on top of body hopping, gravity, and curse manipulation. This is an observation that no other character has made about Kenjaku so far. Not even Gojo with his 6 eyes, Sukuna, Yuji, Choso, or any of the other characters who have interacted with Kenjaku before. This once again highlights how quick Yuki is mentally to pick up on this being a possibility which no one before her or after her did again. Yuki then thinks back to Tengen's plan and what she's going to do against Kenjaku going forward. Yuki determines that her best way to deal with Kenjaku is to wear him down, weaken his domain expansion, have him open his domain, and then capitalize on his weakened state after using it. Kenjaku then picks up on this, calling out Yuki for her hesitation and using his domain at its full strength, making all of Yuki's plans go out of the window, as Kenjaku's domain will be at full force and much stronger than Yuki had planned. This alarms Yuki, who calls on Tengen, as Kenjaku's timing is much quicker than expected. A quick flashback is given where Tengen speaks to Yuki, saying that Kenjaku is on the same level as Tengen when it comes to barrier techniques. Tengen is known as the best barrier user in history, and she puts Kenjaku so far above Yuki that even his simple domain would be on a completely different level than hers. This makes Yuki completely outmatched in terms of raw ability when it comes to domain expansions, but it doesn't completely take her out of the fight. Kenjaku's domain is then spoken about by Tengen as one with an open barrier, which is an amazing feat even to Tengen herself. Yuki responds with simple domain, which is an anti-domain technique meant to neutralize the guaranteed hit of a domain expansion, something that Yuki initially thought would work without issue. But Kenjaku simply rips apart Yuki's simple domain and even questions her for thinking it would work in the first place. This once again shows how big of a gap there is between Yuki and Kenjaku with barrier techniques, and how much of a challenge Yuki is facing on that front. Seeing what's happening to her simple domain, Yuki rushes towards Kenjaku, calling out to Tengen, noting how powerful Kenjaku's barrier is compared to her defenses. Kenjaku then tells Tengen that he's different from having lived through 1,000 years of war and conflicts, and crushes Yuki with the full force of his domain. Kenjaku is already someone that can tame special grade curses in his free time. His domain expansion is the pinnacle of his technique, alongside maximum techniques, so it's one of the strongest moves that he has. Yuki, having taken the full brunt of a domain from one of the strongest on the planet, is then left bloody with one of her hands removed. Kenjaku, seeing that Yuki has been taken down, walks up to her injured body, saying that Tengen dispelling his domain was too late. Kenjaku then tells Yuki that trusting Tengen was a mistake, and a fight with her own domain may not have led to such a poor conclusion. This once again highlights Kenjaku's respect for Yuki's strength, despite the difference between them with barrier techniques, even lending to the idea that Yuki may have stood more of a chance had her domain expansion been used. Yuki Shikigami then stands up, having not disappeared despite Yuki's injuries, and Yuki Tsukumo is shown to still be able to move. Yuki then kicks Kenjaku, being far weaker now to the point where she's coughing up blood, as the damage from Kenjaku's domain is weighing on her body. These are the same punches and kicks that would have ripped Kenjaku's limbs in half before Yuki was crushed by Kenjaku's gravity domain, keeping the pressure on Kenjaku even to the point where she can barely move. Choso then breaks through the Sun Yata barrier, and the fight is now 2 versus 1 with Yuki and Choso versus Kenjaku. Choso, as mentioned before, is a special grade death painting, with strength equal to that of a grade 1 sorcerer. Choso in the Shibuya arc left Yuji at death's door, even after being weakened by fighting in a place that stopped many of his abilities from even working. Yet even with Choso and Yuki fighting Kenjaku at the same time, it isn't enough to make up for Yuki not being at her full strength. Choso fires a piercing blood straight at Kenjaku's head, but Kenjaku survives by loosening the threads that hold his head together, which Yuki calls him out on. Yuki then kicks Kenjaku straight in the head with her curse technique, and Kenjaku ultimately survives. These same kind of attacks would have killed Kenjaku at her full strength, which Yuki even mentions, saying that she was weakened by all the damage she's taken so far, showing once again how much the damage from wound perfusion has weakened her. Choso then notices that Yuki is weakened and buys time for Yuki to heal her injuries. Yuki then takes the opportunity to heal, using reverse curse technique, which lets her heal all physical injuries that don't completely destroy her brain. She then attacks Kenjaku, which fails, as reverse curse technique slowed down Star Rage, giving Kenjaku a chance to escape, once again putting Yuki in a position where Kenjaku escaped death due to her own injuries. Choso and Garuda then attack Kenjaku, with Kenjaku sending both of them crashing to the ground before either of them can reach him. Yuki immediately notices that Kenjaku's gravity technique lasts for 6 seconds, with 2 to 3 meter range around himself, covering the gaps with cursed spirit manipulation. This is something that Choso didn't even think of despite being hit by the technique, and put Yuki's intelligence on full display, once again showing Yuki as a cut above. Swinging at Kenjaku with Garuda, Yuki's attack on Kenjaku resumes. Kenjaku dodges and tries to defend himself with curse manipulation, which Yuki rips through with no problem, saying it won't be enough to stop her. This confirms Kenjaku's suspicion that none of the curses he had could match Yuki, bringing even more relevance to him questioning if he can beat her on his own. Charging in, Yuki once again attacks Kenjaku, landing 2 punches to the face, which Kenjaku survives. Yuki then notes that Kenjaku is weakened, having used his domain expansion and reverse curse technique, both of which have been shown to be a massive drain on the user's curse energy. This reinforces the idea that both Kenjaku and Yuki are weakened, since Yuki has used reverse curse technique as well, which may have chipped away at her curse energy the same way that she implies about her opponent, bringing the fight even more down to the wire as Yuki and Kenjaku are both reaching their limit. Kenjaku then parries one of Yuki's attacks and gets ready to counter, shocking Yuki. Kenjaku then blasts Yuki with 2 mini Uzumakis to damage her upper body and rip through her stomach, since none of her mass increases her durability. When speaking to Yuji, Kenjaku calls maximum techniques a technique's most supreme art next to domain expansions. If this is all true, then this means that Kenjaku has now hit Yuki with his most powerful techniques 3 times in a single fight, and she has enough strength to keep moving. Seeing that the fight has gone to a point of no return, Yuki and Tengen send Choso away, and the climax of Yuki and Kenjaku's fight is now at hand. Yuki then floods her own body with so much mass that she creates a black hole so strong that it could have destroyed the entire planet had it not been kept in check by Tengen and Yuki's force of will. Black holes are so strong that not even light can escape them, despite light moving at speeds of over 671 million miles per hour. While putting out so much energy with density so high, you'd have to shrink the entire Earth down to the size of a quarter to replicate its effects. Kenjaku then counters this black hole using his anti-gravity technique that he stole from Kaori Itadori, and Yuki's sacrifice ends without taking Kenjaku's life. After her death, Yuki's research is passed on to Choso, the lone survivor of the clash with Kenjaku after Tengen was absorbed. Choso then approaches Yuji, giving him Yuki's records about the soul, along with the back of Prison Realm. Yuji is then implied to have eaten the remaining death paintings and gains an unconfirmed ability to swap souls with his opponents. Whether Yuki had any ability to do this or not is completely unknown, but seeing as the author only ever attributes Yuji eating a death painting to him gaining a burst of curse energy, the odds of this being a byproduct of Yuki's research is extremely high. Many people feel that Yuki is a wasted character, and that her fight against Kenjaku was too quick of an end for such a powerful sorcerer. And while I don't necessarily disagree, there is a reason why Yuki's journey as a character ending against Kenjaku does make sense. Yuki's entire career as a sorcerer has been dedicated to finding a way to remove cursed spirits from the world entirely, either by getting rid of cursed energy or through teaching cursed energy control. This put her at odds with Jujutsu Society, which basically meant that Yuki was completely on her own. This would then take Yuki overseas, where she would travel the world for many years, collecting research about the soul and gaining more strength for a mission that only she could do. 10 years after Yuki met Suguru, a sorcerer by the name of Kenjaku made his appearance and took Suguru's dead body and claimed it as his own. Kenjaku has been on a mission for the last 1,000 years of wanting to push the limits of human potential, wanting to create as much chaos as possible by using cursed energy in its most chaotic form. This paints him as a direct antagonist to Yuki, who wants to save humanity, compared to Kenjaku, wanting to bring as much death and violence as possible with his new world. Kenjaku and Yuki's journeys as those who want to influence the entire world with either getting rid of or using cursed energy almost made them fated to face each other in the end. After having a brief clash of words with Yuki, Where their motives are shown to contrast one another, Yuki becomes Tengen's bodyguard to oppose the hunt for Tengen by Kenjaku. Kenjaku does compliment Yuki's strength several times, but ultimately her own downfall comes from relying too much on Tengen's plans instead of her own strength. A theme that's presented many times in the story, where giving it your all and risking everything has consistently been shown as the way to go, basically punishing Yuki for not believing in her own strength from beginning to end. A sentiment that Kenjaku even echoes to Yuki. Yuki's curse technique, Star Rage, is described as imbuing virtual mass into her body. Virtual mass is a concept derived from physics, where an object behaves like it has one mass but actually has another. It would be like if you made your own arm hit like a Mack truck, while your body looks no different than it did before. What Star Rage essentially does is allow Yuki to become far stronger than she normally would be, depending on how much she wants to fuel the technique with her own cursed energy. Using Star Rage, Yuki is able to deal immense amounts of damage to her enemies, so much that her strength is said to break logic by Kenjaku. Yuki's strength with Star Rage can be amped so heavily that she can take special grade sorcerers who would be some of the strongest people in the verse and break them in half. This is to the extent that Kenjaku, one of the top tiers in the series, gets his arm ripped open and crashes through a barrier from one of the best barrier users in history from a single punch by Yuki Tsukumo, even openly saying that she would have killed Kenjaku with one kick to the head had she not been weakened beforehand, showing that she can one-shot many characters in the series, especially those that rank below her. Yuki's curse technique can be extended to a Shikigami that she has under her control, Garuda. Yuki has made the Shikigami into a cursed tool that can be targeted by her abilities. Cursed tools are tools that are imbued with a curse technique that range anywhere from grade 4 to special grade, like sorcerers and cursed spirits. Yuki's Garuda is the only example of a Shikigami being turned into a cursed tool, and is yet again something that sets her apart from many other characters in the series. With Yuki's strength and technique being part of what made her a special grade sorcerer, it's possible that Garuda may be a special grade cursed tool as well. Using her Shikigami Garuda, Yuki can use Star Rage independently of her own body. It's also a major advantage for Yuki for dealing with technique burnout after a domain expansion, where she points out that using Garuda gives her an advantage even if her technique becomes difficult to use. Garuda can also be used as a weapon to be swung or launched at its targets to rip straight through their bodies using the same virtual mass that Yuki would imbue into herself. Yuki's most dangerous move that she's shown so far is the black hole. No one knows what her domain expansion even does since she didn't use it, making this her strongest known technique to date. Yuki uses her technique Star Rage to flood her body with mass beyond her own limits, flooding so much mass that she can turn her own body into a black hole. After using this move a single time, Yuki is shown to have died since the amount of mass that she flooded into her own body surpassed her limits. This move is a last resort that will kill Yuki, as it's meant for self-sacrifice and not something that would be used in a normal fight. Using this move, Yuki can flood so much mass into her body that she mimics a real black hole's effects, which the author makes sure to point out when she does this for the first time. Black holes are strong enough to suck in light that moves at over 600 million miles per hour, and was blatantly said by Kenjaku, the target of the technique, to be able to blow up the entire planet on its own. This is a feat that no one else has replicated at any point in time. That's beyond any strength or durability feats that anyone has shown as well. Basically saying, if Yuki uses this on anyone in the series and they can't hack their way out of it like Kenjaku, they die. Gege Akutami is someone who's gone on record several times to say he's a fan of Bleach, a series that inspired his work in many ways, and the character of Yuki Tsukumo is no different. When creating Todo, Yuki's student, the idea that Akutami was going for revolved around Zaraki Kenpachi, the man who became one of the strongest during his time. Someone who was a heavy influence on Zaraki throughout his life was Unohana, who was already one of the strongest captains of the Gotei 13 when Zaraki was a child, who many people didn't understand was as strong as she was until her life's end. Putting all this together, the same way that Todo is based on Zaraki Kenpachi, a man with a lust for battle that holds himself back against weak opponents to enjoy a fight, Yuki can be compared to Unohana, someone who's far stronger than many around her had ever known. Click the video on your screen to hear more about Kenjaku.